What is going on, guys? Taki Guy 1 here. Welcome to my ranking of all the 2020 movies that I saw. Starting off the list at number 33, I got Dolittle. So yeah, this movie just really failed. I mean, I guess maybe there was some small potential with it, but like, it just didn't really turn out to be anything special. I mean, it's kind of like pretty much what I expected it to be. I mean, it just wasn't really much. I mean, it was just really boring and kind of dragged out the runtime a bit, and kind of like in the second act a lot. It just kind of dragged out, and there's just a lot of really kind of unfunny jokes. Some of them like a bit disturbing jokes to the point where like they're kind of unfunny, and it's just that really I feel like this failed on nearly every level with this movie. I mean, it's just a really awful movie with a story that's kind of dragged on for way too long, and just kind of really just a bad movie in general that just didn't work for me. I just didn't really find it to be very funny, really, and just doesn't really work. Number 32, I got Artemis Fowl. Now, this is another really awful movie that I mostly just saw because I had to deal with a friend, and it's just more so that it's just kind of a movie that just kind of had, well, an idea, but they just came up with really boring, just really bad execution, just about like every single way. And it's this movie, it's really boring, kind of like Dolittle, and just its filmmaking merits just don't really work very much, and it's just that it could have done really a lot better with this, to be honest, and I definitely wish that this movie was better than what it was, even if I did have really low expectations and didn't really expect it to be anything. It just kind of was that, to be honest, and I definitely think they could have done better, and definitely just kind of a boring and like overlong story, really. Number 31, I got Fantasy Island. Now, this movie is just kind of like one of those horror movies that just doesn't really work very well. I mean, its concept doesn't really make sense. It just, obviously, the concept not really making any sense. The execution of that very concept just doesn't work, and it's more so one of those horror movies that really isn't very scary, and because it's not really very scary, it also like has a story that ends up not really being very engaging and just kind of incomplete, really. I mean, I definitely wish they did more with this movie's story, and there isn't really much to it, and definitely do wish they did a bit more with it, and it really came off as kind of not very engaging movie, and just really awful, really. Coming in number 30, I got Trolls World Tour. Now, this movie, basically, I expected it to suck, and it was almost as bad as what it was, so I thought it was. I mean, it's just that this movie's story is way too cliched. I mean, I'm kind of okay with cliches as long as you don't really use too many of them. It's kind of a problem with any recent DreamWorks movies. They just kind of like use a lot of cliches, but don't really kind of like use it to a minimum. Like, they just kind of use too many of them, and like, it's not really that, like, there's the whole like pop songs that are just really kind of annoying. They don't really work for this movie. Just a lot of the pop songs were just there because they needed them to be pop songs, because it's just how the franchise goes, and I definitely wish they did better song choices for that, and and just a lot of this movie just relies on cliches, and like they kind of have two third act breakups that just don't really work very well, and definitely do wish they did a much better job with this movie, and kind of like using less cliches to it, and just really being what's annoying. It's just more just a movie that's not really for me. For number 29, I got Bloodshot. Now, this movie is another really awful movie. I mean, they definitely could have done a lot more with this. I do feel like it had somewhat of potential, but obviously the way the movie came out ended up being trash. I mean, it just really doesn't work on nearly every level. I mean, there's a few things that worked out with it, like Vin Diesel to do a decent job in this role with me, but like the movie's story just doesn't really keep me engaged. I mean, I wish they did a lot more with stories rather than just kind of like a simple premise that doesn't really get brought in anywhere. And I wish they kind of like brought it out more than what they did with the movie, as basically it just kind of came off as a movie that just really felt like nothing really. I mean, it just, they didn't do much with this movie, and I just feel like they could have done a lot better with what they did in this movie, as basically just kind of came off as a bit boring and definitely nothing really more than a simple premise. At number 28, I got The New Mutants. Now, this movie is a movie that was actually on my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2019, and like obviously like, all the delays it got kind of like dropped down my anticipation a bit. I mean, and it definitely really shows with a lot of the reshoots. I mean, a lot of the reshoots don't really work well into the movie, and you can definitely see how they kind of like use them at the like very last second. And it's just that I wish that if this movie didn't really do reshoots, I guarantee you the movie definitely would have benefited off of it, because like you can clearly tell with the reshoots during editing and just how changes with each camera angle. You can clearly see the kind of changes. And I mean, this movie definitely didn't even come out with a good start, as the movie started with bad lighting, and it's just that this movie's story just, again, it's another one of those movies where they kind of had decent ideas for it, but like none of the ideas really meshed well together, and just really, it just didn't really come up as a good story. It just ended up being kind of a mess, and it's honestly one of my least favorite in the X-Men franchise. Number 27, I got Birds of Prey. Now, this movie is just really awful, really. I mean, it's just that this movie's stories didn't really work very well. I mean, it's basically supposed to be a Birds of Prey movie, but they focus way too much on Harley Quinn for it to really feel like a Birds of Prey movie, as they just don't really feel like a team. They don't really have much chemistry. It's just that it just doesn't really work as a story, really. But if you do want more details, I do have a full review on it. If you want to go check it out, I'm probably put it on the card in this video. And yeah, it's just a really awful movie that just doesn't really feel like a Birds of Prey movie. It's more of a Harley Quinn standalone movie. Number 26, I got Wonder Woman 1984. Now, this movie is definitely the most disappointing movie I saw this year. I expected much more out of it, and it kind of really turned into a convoluted story that just really didn't mesh well together. And again, I have a 22-minute review that I've made recently, and so yeah, you can go watch that as well if you need more details than what I'm explaining here. And basically, a lot of this movie is just don't work at all. I mean, it just feels like they lost their way midway through the story, and it more so seems like it's just really convoluted, and definitely could have done like a lot more with this movie than what it did, and it just ended up being convoluted. Number 25, I got Bad Boys for Life. Now, this is a movie I did really want to be good. I mean, the first one was mediocre, while the second one was pretty bad, but I did want this movie to be good. I mean, I heard a lot of good things about it, and I definitely really wanted it to be good. And at the end of the day, it really just turned into a movie with kind of a messy story and just kind of good action, but like it's more so just like a decent action movie, and just story-wise just doesn't really work out very well. And I feel like the movie definitely cared more about action than story, so it more felt like style over substance. And I wish that the movie did more with its story. They kind of like progress it more than just focusing on the action only. Number 24, I got The Crew to New Age. Now, this movie is another one of those movies that really feel more like style over substance, really. I mean, they seem like they cared more about the animation than they did the story, because like the animation is gorgeous for sure, but like story-wise, it really felt like it went backwards, especially like with Grug's character. It felt like it went backwards from the first movie, just because it seemed like he was trying to learn the same lesson exactly about what he got in the first movie, but without really kind of making it look like he changed it all. I mean, it's just kind of dumb how they did that. I mean, why he continues to just progress his character more rather than just backwards developing him. It just feels like they could have done a lot more, and especially did not like the new characters, like the Bettermans, just really annoying characters, and this movie's story doesn't really work out for it, and it just kind of wish that I did much more with it, especially when it gets to like the third act. It's really weird and just doesn't really make sense for this movie. It just felt kind of like random. Number 23, I got Scoob. Now this movie is pretty mediocre. I mean, there's nothing really much to it I can really talk about. I mean, it's just that a lot of the movie story really just does not work very well. I'm not really a fan of many of the characters. I feel like they wasted a lot of like the main cast, and then there's Blue Falcon who gets a lot of time and is really annoying, and then there's of course the whole third act break thing. This one just doesn't really work. It just kind of comes off as kind of random, to be honest. I don't really like how they do that, and it's just kind of funny for like the wrong reasons how they kind of do it. It's just kind of stupid. And it just that a lot of this movie's story isn't very good, but this movie really could have been a lot worse. It just really ended up being a mediocre movie and nothing else. Number 22, I got Sonic the Hedgehog. Now this movie, again, is just very mixed. I mean, a lot of things work, a lot of things don't work. It's just very mixed and mediocre. Like, this movie's story just really didn't feel like anything that special. Wish they did more with it, and I definitely feel like they could have done a lot more with a lot of elements with this movie, and it's more so just that it's just really mediocre. It's not really awful. It's not really great. There's a lot of things that work better, a lot of things that don't. Like, obviously the redesign is pretty good, but like a lot of the movie's problems comes in its story and structure, which doesn't really get changed on the design. And yeah, if you do need more detail, I also did review this all the way back in like March. Number 21, I got Mulan. Now this movie, pretty average as well. I mean, obviously it is very different from the original, and I feel like in some ways that is alright, it works, but also that kind of like goes against the movie as well. Like some of the new things they added in just didn't really fit well into the story, and there's also just kind of bad editing in this movie, and just really just bad photography, really. I mean, this movie it's kind of like that. The action scenes it just doesn't really work out very well. It's just kind of just poorly edited in a lot of places. And this movie is just another one of those movies where they have things that work and things that don't work in the story. So it really just falls in the middle. It's average and nothing really much else. And again, if you need more detail, I did review this back when it came out. Number 20, I got the one and only Ivan. Now, this is a movie that I definitely feel like could have been a lot better than what it was. I really feel like it had a lot of potential with what they were going for, with the whole thing of Ivan wanting to be free. But the problem with that is just that it really feels like they tried to squander that in randomly, and I just wish that it did a lot more with that kind of concept behind it, and it's just more so just that it kind of needed a bit more to it to kind of make it a great movie. It's just really comes off as squandered potential, really, because of that, and it just that, again, it's far from a bad movie. It's more so just kind of falls in the middle of the average. It's just that it definitely could have been a lot better than what it was with the amount of potential this type of story has, as I do feel like it does send a pretty good message. It's just that I wish they did a bit more with that message, that it could have been end up being a fantastic movie rather than just an average movie. Number 19, I got Big Time Adolescence. I don't really have much to say about this movie. It is a movie I saw a like with a friend on Discord like a while back. There isn't really much to say about this movie. It's alright, nothing much to it. I mean, it has a few good ideas, but there are a lot of things in the movie structure that kind of leaves it off from being a great movie, and it's just that it kind of comes off as a really messy movie, as there are definitely some things in this movie story and structure that could have been taken out, and it's just more so a movie that could have been a great movie, but again, they just kind of kept too many scenes and it just kind of ended up being an alright movie. Number 18, I got SpongeBob Baby Sponge on the Run. Now this movie I did kind of like, but like, it definitely does have a lot of issues. I mean, you can definitely tell they definitely just tried to put the Camp Coral stuff in at the last moment, mostly just because they wanted to promote the show, and you can definitely tell that it was added in at the last second, because it just didn't really seem like it needed to be there. It just kind of seemed like it was a random move in the story, so it kind of feels a bit unnecessary, but like, I did like the whole concept of the whole thing, like, before they even did any of that. Like, it was fine, like, the whole thing of Poseidon taking Gary and that to find them, like, I liked that idea. That I think it mostly worked for what it was, but at least before they kind of got into the whole stuff of the whole Camp Coral and stuff like that, and as well as just the whole thing where Sage is there, and it's just, a lot of it just feels kind of random after that. It just kind of was a bit messy. I can definitely see why some people don't like this movie, even if I did kind of enjoy it, and it is just a movie that just had a lot of potential, but you can definitely tell was kind of squirmish and just kind of changed from the original idea, so it ended up being worse than really what it could have been. Number 17, I got The Devil All the Time. Now this is a movie that it's just pretty good. I mean, I really like the whole movie behind it. I mean, I found it to be really interesting, and they do a pretty good job keeping it like together pretty well, and especially do like our main character Arvin, and they do a pretty good job with his character, and he's the best character in this movie. Basically, they do a good job kind of developing him, and just a good job kind of like keeping you like into the character and just really developing him pretty well. And I do feel like they do a good job with that sort of thing. And then there's just pretty much everything. This movie and this character just works pretty well. I mean, this movie's far from perfect, as obviously there are a few flaws in the movie story, and definitely feel like a few characters just don't really do much in this movie, and just don't really feel like they need to be in there. But overall, this movie is definitely good for what it is, and is definitely a very interesting movie for what it is. Number 16, I got Invisible Man, another movie that I did like, but definitely is not like a fantastic movie, but it's a pretty good movie for what it is. I mean, it is sort of scary at times, but like, at times it's not really that scary, and definitely does have a few faults in its story, and it definitely isn't perfect, but I do really like it as this whole concept of this whole thing of someone going after one person and then trying to stop it. It does work pretty well into a horror movie, as it is kind of give that spooky feeling, and I do feel like they do a pretty good job like showing that whole thing, and it's just a pretty good movie for what it is. I mean, it's not a perfect horror movie and all, but it is pretty good for what it is. Number 15, I got The Call of the Wild. Now, this is a movie that definitely did surprise me. I mean, I expected it to be good, but I didn't really expect that much out of it. I mean, it definitely did surprise me about how good it was. I mean, I did really like the relationship that they used for like Buck and John. I mean, they do a really good job kind of progressing that as it goes, and it's just really like how eventually they just let Buck go and stay in the wild and just let him go on his own. It does work, especially when Buck saves John at the end and he ends up blaming. It's a pretty sad ending for this movie, and I do really like how this movie is progressed, and it's just a really surprisingly good movie, and I just really enjoyed it a lot, and I did also review this all the way back in like March or April, so if you do still need more details, you could also check out that. 14, I got Bill and Ted Face the Music. Now this is a movie, you can't really know much of what I was going to think beforehand. I mean, I did really like Excellent Adventure, but Bogus Journey, I was pretty mixed on, and then here for now. This movie was great for what it was. I mean, I do really like how they do this type of story. I mean, it's obviously a bit silly because, I mean, it's Bill and Ted. It's obviously going to be silly, and you know, and so I do really like how they kind of put it into the story, and that's just how they're trying to like, save them. And I do kind of like that. I mean, just the whole kind of concept behind this is pretty good, and I feel like they did a pretty good job executing it, especially like how this movie was done, and especially felt that this movie is just a really good movie for what it is. I mean, it's just a movie that just, I didn't really expect it to be that great, but it ended up being a great movie, and definitely did like how they ended up progressing Bill and Ted's relationship more, especially like with like their kind of lines, and as well as their kids. I especially like how their kids were done in this movie, and it's just a really good job and with that, and it's ended up becoming a surprising movie in the end. Number 13, I got Shaun the Sheep Farm Again. Now, this movie is obviously a sequel to the 2015 movie Shaun the Sheep, and to be honest, coming into this movie, I didn't really know what much to expect. I mean, it did definitely seem like a kind of silly concept, but I do feel like they do use the concept pretty well. They kind of tell a little story, and I do like just like how in the first movie they kind of keep the sheep kind of silent. They don't really talk. They just kind of make you like have to pay attention, like tell the story, and I do feel like that it executes well in this movie. And even if like this kind of silly concept of farming, and it does kind of seems like it wouldn't really work very well, but it did end up working pretty well to its advantage, and it ended up being a fun movie to watch, and just a great movie overall. Number 12, I got Enola Holmes. Now, this is obviously a Sherlock Holmes movie, but I do like what they do with said movie. I mean, it's just really good how they ended up showing Enola's character, and how it's like she's trying to like kind of show her destiny, and I just really like how they end up doing it. I mean, there are some weird things in this that I don't really like, but like, this movie's story is really interesting. I like how they do it, and it just really works over time and how they wrote Enola's character, and I do really think that this is definitely an interesting Sherlock Holmes movie, and it's just really interesting how they ended up doing this movie. I mean, especially since that I didn't really expect much out of this, but it ended up being another one of those movies that kind of like surprised me about how good it was, and just does a really good job progressing this movie's story, and just really developing the character of Enola Holmes, and it's really, you can just see kind of how important it is, and it's just that they do a good job with that, and I just really found me invested in the story, and it's just really interesting how they did it, and it just really surprised me in the end. Number 11, I got Borat's subsequent movie film. Now, this movie is just really one of those movies that just, you gotta sit back to laugh. I mean, it's just a silly movie that's pretty funny. I mean, it's just more like that, and it basically makes fun of America, kind of, and it's just kind of funny in that kind of case, and it's just a movie that you can sit back and have fun watching. It's just a great movie for that, and it's just a really fun movie to watch, because it's just everything, most of the jokes land, and it's just a silly movie that does work for what it is, and really just kind of makes fun of America in 2020, and definitely does work for that, and it just kind of found it funny for that. Now we're into the top 10, starting at number 10, The King of Staten Island. Now, this is a movie I didn't really expect much, and then Dad did invite me to watch it, and I didn't really know much about it until he invited me to watch it with him, and I honestly did enjoy watching it a lot, and I feel like the story itself just works out pretty well. I mean, just the whole concept of this person kind of getting along with this kind of father of mother to they're kind of getting together, and they didn't really get along with that person very well, just because, well, he gave a tattoo to his kid, and he's had to try and grow that relationship, and I like how they end up doing it a lot, and it really flows well with it, and it's just that whole relationship kind of makes up that story, and I do really like how it's done, and it's just how they kind of get together and gain their trust over time, and it does end up working out to this movie's advantage pretty well, and it's the whole reason why I do like this movie a lot, because they do a good job with that relationship, and that does take up a lot of the movie story. Number 9, I got Onward. Now, this is a movie that I just really liked, and he and Barley's relationship did grow over time, and it just really got me into it, especially just their whole thing is just how they're trying to bring their father back. This movie's ending definitely did hit me, and they did a good job progressing the story, and it's just really interesting how they end up growing Ian's character, and with Barley's character. It's just really like how they end up doing that, and they do a good job with it, and especially like the style of animation they use for it. Does look really good, and yeah, again, back when this movie came out, I made a review of it. You can go check that out if you need more details. Number 8, I got Soul. Now, this movie is just another one of Pixar's fantastic movies. I really like how they did this. I mean, just the whole idea of Soul is something that's just really interesting, and they do a good job with it, especially with the way it's executed, just how they end up progressing. The character of Joe Gardner is just really good, just how she's just kind of, I think more just how he's into jazz, and they just do a good job with his character, and it's just how he ends up getting a second chance and ends up earning it. I do really like how they end up doing it, and then especially there's also the 22 is pretty well written, and it's not, and I'm going to be making a review of this soon, I promise, and I do plan to do more details in that. So, yeah, this movie is fantastic, and I just think they do a good job with the animation and just the characters and the story. I mean, nearly everything about this movie works, and even if it's not perfect, which, again, soon will have a review up for this. It's just, I don't really know when it's gonna go up, but I am working on it, so it should be out soon. Number 7, I got Greyhound. Now, this is a movie I just really love. I mean, it's a World War II movie. It's not the best war movie, but it is a really good one to add in, and I do feel like they do a good job kind of showing how hard they have to do to just accomplish things and to try and get the stuff to print. I mean, it's just a really engaging war movie, even if it's not the best one. I still really love it for what it is, and it's just a really good job kind of showing how hard it is to get there, and it's just really interesting to show how hard the troops had to do just do it. I mean, a lot of times they had to avoid U-boats and everything. It's just really engaging and just really interesting to see what these guys went through just to try and get things to Britain. Number 6, I got The Trial of Chicago 7. Now, this is a movie that is based on a true story that, honestly, I did have minimal knowledge before watching this movie, and I do feel like I learned a lot from this movie, which is something I do really like about history movies. I mean, I do like it when they kind of try to teach you more about a real event that happened, and this movie definitely did do that, and it kind of showed just how hard they did just to try and improve, and they didn't really do anything wrong, and just how they tried to get through with all these trials, and it's just really interesting how they did it, and just really trying to see how hard they tried to do, and just to try and make themselves, try and prove they were innocent. I mean, I do really like how they did that, and it just really shows how hard they had to do, and it's just really interesting and helped me learn more about this whole trial of Chicago 7. Number 5, I got The Way Back. Now, this movie really surprised me how fantastic it was, just how they kind of show Jack Cunningham, this guy who's like this coach who used to be a player back for this high school called Bishops, and it's just really interesting to see how like he's just really trying to help all the players like act like a team, and you're gonna see like even when he met hard on one player, and you can see like how he's just trying to get them to like move up and end up even making them make the playoffs at the end. I mean, cause like he just really, you can see like how he just tried to make the team like together and like forms more. I mean, you can just see how he's just kind of like helping him, and they do a good job kind of showing that. And I just really like a movie like this, and I wish there was more like this out here, to be honest. I mean, it's just really interesting how they did that, and just really showed how he helped the team. And even like after he got fired because of the whole drink thing, and you can just see like the impact he put on the team, because even when he was gone, they were still doing really good, because it felt like a team because of him. And I just really like how this type of movie did that, and I wish that there were more movies like this out here, because it's just really interesting as a sports player myself, seeing how they kind of like do stuff like that. Number 4, I got Palm Springs. Now the idea of Palm Springs is just really a kind of movie that like you have to really execute well to make it work, and I feel like they did a great job with it. I mean, just the whole concept of it is it kind of feels like a Groundhog Day concept. It's kind of like they're redoing the same day over and over and over again, but I definitely feel like the way this movie is executed does make it work and make it more interesting, and it's just really like how they kind of like make it into a movement, is how they kind of just trying it out and just what they keep doing, and it's just really interesting to see what they're trying to do to kind of, and it's just, I like how they kind of have an explanation for it even, and they do a good job with that. It's our 2 main characters are just really fantastic, and they do a great job with this movie story, and it's just really interesting. Its concept is just something that like you have to execute really well for it to work, and they definitely did execute it really well, and it ended up working to nearly perfection. Number 3, I got I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Now this movie is just a really kind of interesting topic, to be honest. I mean, just the whole type of story this movie seems like it'd be kind of confusing, but like you definitely do keep on to it as it goes, and it just, you do a good job with their whole main character, and like the relationship with Jake. I mean, just that whole thing is the basically main concept of this movie. I mean, they spent a long time just kind of talking to each other, and they do a good job progressing that, and it's just really interesting how this movie story is. I mean, it's a bit different from a normal kind of story, and its structure is a bit different, but I do feel like it's pretty much executed to perfection, and they just do a good job with it, kind of like making it feel like it's a whole complete story, and just kind of, especially like when the mother's house, it just really worked pretty well, and they do a fantastic job with it, and it's just really interesting how they do this. Number 2, I got Mink. Now this movie is one that I really find interesting as someone who does want to get into film myself. I mean, you can really see how hard Mink himself just is trying to like make the script for Citizen Kane. I mean, it's just really interesting how they did this. I mean, it's obviously based on a real story, and it's just an event that I really found interesting. Like the makings of Citizen Kane, it just made it more interesting, and especially like how they kind of like made it in the cinematography in black and white, like it normally would, if it was filmed then. And it's just, I always appreciate movies that do that, as it makes it more feel like it was in the time period that it takes place in, and I just really find it interesting just how hard it took me just to make the script of Citizen Kane, as someone who definitely does want to get into film myself and kind of do that. And it's just a movie that does progress pretty well, and it just really shows how hard he has to work for it, and I just really like how they did that. Number 1, I got Tenet. Once again, Christopher Nolan hit, and it's just really one of those movies you have to pay attention closely to understand, and I just really love how Tenet is made. I mean, it's just an interesting concept. It's kind of like a weird kind of concept that you have to pay attention closely to. I mean, just the whole inverted kind of stuff. And again, this is another one of those movies that I have made a review on, so like, if you're interested, you can go check that out. And yeah, and it's just, this movie just really work out for what it's trying to do, and I do really like how this movie's concept is kind of inverted. I mean, that's something I really like about Christopher Nolan. He just always kind of uses weird concepts to its advantage to make a complete story to it, and it's just, this movie is no different from that. It is really works for what it is, and it's just a really interesting movie with an interesting concept that doesn't inform me pretty well. That was my ranking of all 2020 movies that I saw. What is your ranking, or top 10 best movies, depending on what you want to put? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.